you survived and you didn't give them COVID. So
it's a tough thing to do right now.
I was going to say, I would agree.
Good evening.
Hi, Councilor Shaw.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. Mr. Nola,
Hi, Steve.
how's the technology look? Mike? Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Alrighty. Thanks.
Hi, Councilor Newton. Hi, Councilor Goodhouse.
Hi.
Mr. Nullip, will you let us know when we're ready to go? All right, I will call this Tigard City Council meeting to order. City Recorder Kreger, please call roll.
Councilor Goodhouse.
Yes.
Councilor Newton.
Here.
Council President Lube.
Here.
Councilor Shaw.
Here.
Mayor Snyder.
Here.
Youth Councilor Nog.
Here.
All right. I will ask everyone to mute themselves. Mr. Nullip, please put up the flag and participate in the Pledge of Allegiance on your own. All right. Thank you, Mr. Nullip. Councilor staff, any non-agenda items?
None from us, Mr. Mayor and councilors.
All right. Thank you. We'll move to public comment. The call-in number to make public comment is 503-966-4101. And those with general comments should call now to get in the queue. If you're wishing to testify on agenda item number 5, which is the quasi-judicial public hearing, you should call in at the beginning of that item on the agenda when you hear me call it. So now is the time to call for general public comment, and we'll move on to follow up from previous public comment. Assistant City Manager Nyland, do you have any?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. At the last council meeting, we did receive written comment from a community member who also called in. The communication was about the term limit issue, and receipt of message was indeed sent to that constituent. So as far as my fun fact, it's more an interesting fact. So according to the Almanac, the long-range weather forecast for Tigard says, quote, winter temperatures will be milder than normal, with below normal precipitation and snowfall. The coldest periods will occur in December, specifically from late December into early January, and in mid-January and early, again in early March, we'll have more snowfall. The snowiest period is going to occur in late December and again in early March. So the almanac is correct. Summer will also have above normal temperatures. Yay! So one of the things that we've learned in 2021 and now in 2022 is the reminder of the importance of having warming and cooling shelters available and the importance of HVAC systems. So that is my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And it sounds like you're all but guaranteeing some snow in March. Okay. We'll make note of that. Let's see. Written public comments. City Recorder Krager, I believe we had one written public comment, and it was from a constituent that was writing also about the term limit issue. I think letter came from Linda Monahan. Did the city council receive that? Okay. All right. We'll move on to phone-in public comment. Mr. Nola, do we have any callers in the queue?
Mr. Mayor, at this time, no callers.
All right. I don't believe we have any proclamations or recognitions, so we'll move on to item number 4 on our agenda, which is to consider a 2022 state and federal legislative agenda. Senior Management Analyst Hendricks.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. It's good to see you. My name is Nicole Hendricks, and I'm the Senior Management Analyst in the City Manager's Office here at Tigard. Tonight, I'm here to present the list of legislative priorities for your consideration for our 2022 state and federal legislative agendas. So each year we consider our citywide priorities, community and partner initiatives, and our local issues and opportunities to represent our interests at the state and federal level for the upcoming year. And our ask of you tonight is that you have reviewed the attached priority lists in your agenda item packet to discuss and recommend any changes to those lists tonight, and then move to adopt the priorities with any recommended changes. So in the past, we've asked you to select 4 to 6 priorities for inclusion in the final state and federal legislative agenda. But this year, we're asking you to adopt the list as a whole, and the Tigard team will take those high-level categories and incorporate them into the final agendas, and the priority lists will be pursued throughout the year as opportunities arise. So with that, for our federal priorities, we have 3 overarching categories, which are transportation and infrastructure, housing and support services, and city funding. And within those, we have a number of more specific priorities, which are detailed in your agenda packet. It includes items like under city funding, you have pursuing federal earmark opportunities. And I guess it's a good opportunity to note that we are continuing to partner with CFM Communications, who help represent and connect us at the federal level. And that includes those earmark opportunities. And so with the help of department teams, CFM, and also just in alignment with the National League of Cities kind of federal agendas, we've developed this list for your consideration. And for the state agenda, state priorities, you might notice there are similar categories to our federal list. So again, we have the transportation and infrastructure, we have housing and support services, city funding, and then we also have a 4th category that captures some of those items that we'd like to keep as a priority, such as police reform, mental health services, but didn't quite fit within those buckets. And the League of Oregon City priorities for the upcoming year have remained the same as last year, since this is a short session for the state. Theirs includes items like mental health, property tax reform, infrastructure support. And so we did incorporate that into the development of our priority lists. And we are part of ongoing conversations with the league to stay coordinated. So for sake of time and to allow for more discussion, I won't read through all of the items, but I also did want to point out with the state session, in 2021, the state adopted new congressional and legislative redistricting plans. And so those elections with the new plans will take place this year in 2022, and then those elected will take their seats in 2023 in January. So Tigard will be in a new House District 25 with Beaverton, and then we will be in a new Senate District 13 with Sherwood and Wilsonville, and then most of Tigard is in a new 6th congressional district, and that's along with Tualatin, Sherwood, and Wilsonville. So we are going to continue collaborating with our Washington County cities on large projects that require federal support, and we'll work with CFM to ensure that happens. But I just wanted to note that that was a big item for 2021, and it'll impact us moving forward. So with that, that was just a high-level overview. I'll open it up to you to add or remove items from the list, and also move to adopt the lists as a whole. So thank you.
Nicole, can I ask that as we're discussing, can you put the
Yes.
federal one up first, and then we'll so we can use that as our, I think it'll be easier to have that on the screen if everybody finds that helpful. It's a little better summary, or easier to see the summary than the write-ups. So thank you. And Nicole, did you have anything more you wanted to say? I didn't mean to cut you off. I just didn't want you to pull the slides down. Okay. So let's do round robin on the federal list, and then we'll do round robin on the state list. So Council President Lube, comments or things you want to add or remove on the federal priority list?
Yeah, it feels a little different this year, not picking priorities and sort of approving the list and coming up with additional things. And I know that, we did, we have the ARPA funding and those sorts of things, but as, Omicron is continuing to go and all of that's continuing on, it feels like we potentially have a hole for continuing to support businesses and individuals. Yes, affordable housing is one, but also keeping people in their homes and those sorts of, so it feels like a gap around that, excuse me, seems to be missing, but otherwise I felt like it was a pretty good list. So that's the only thing that I would add.
And Council President Lube, can I clarify, are you thinking that's a gap on the state list or on the federal list, or both? Because if so, we might want to say something on the federal side.
Well, I assumed we were going through the federal list since that's the slide that's up,
Yes.
that we were doing one at a time. So yes, so,
Okay.
Potentially on both, but definitely on, on the federal level to continue to push for support that flows down to our residents and our businesses.
Okay. Perfect. And my question was more specifically about the housing part, but I thank you for your feedback. Youth Councilor Nog, thoughts and comments or additions on the federal priority list?
I haven't actually seen the actual list. I'm still trying to find it. But one of the things regarding infrastructure that I wanted to touch on both on the federal and state level is when it comes to infrastructure, I was wondering if there was a way to avoid like highway extensions or expanding roads. It's come to my attention that oftentimes highway expansions are increasing carbon emissions, and there hasn't been a clear correlation with expanding highways and freeways and like roads in general and decrease in traffic. And I was wondering if it was possible to keep that in mind going forward.
Okay.
And for
I think that's certainly a great comment, and one to continue to consider, and definitely that may cause us. When I look at the federal list here, I think most of it is supportive of that. I think on the state list, there may be some things that we should talk about there, though I don't know that we're talking about expanding road capacity, but we should look at that for sure on the state level.
Yeah,
and
I had a question.
Go ahead.
For the state priority list, are these bills that are being tracked in the 2022 short session?
Nicole can answer that, but I don't think necessarily. Some of them don't have a specific bill right now, probably.
Yes, that's correct. But just in case opportunity comes up, we wanted to include them on the lists. Yeah.
Okay. If there were any specific bill suggestions, I would say looking into House Bill 2007, which would be extending JARDOH task force, which would authorizing housing and community services to provide grants and technical assistance to organizations increasing home ownership to undeserved communities and including people of color.
Thank you for that. Nicole, is that a bill you've been tracking?
It will be. And
Okay.
we do have a bill tracker. So once the session starts, our team has an Excel sheet that we track all these. So I will add that to the list and we'll keep track of it. So thank you.
And not to interrupt, but I believe in our Friday list, last session, we were getting updates on the bills as the session was going through. So it would be helpful to have that continue.
Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think with regards to the federal priorities, which we're covering now, with the emphasis on infrastructure at the federal level, with the infrastructure bill that passed and potentially the Build Back Better, I would really like us to focus on that being a priority. I understand Southwest Corridors on the list and high-speed rail, but that is not currently the focus of the administration. And so I'd hate for Tiger to lose out on the opportunity to have the infrastructure funding come to the city. So that's one area I'd like to just highlight, and recognizing we have 3 categories, which I do like, but I agree with Council President Lube. It's a little challenging when that's not a hierarchical list. So I would hope that we take advantage, and I'm sure CFM notes that as well, that we take advantage of what the political winds look like at the federal level. And I'll also have some additional requests, such as if we could see the bill tracker, that'd be great. So thank you, Nicole. Appreciate that.
Councillor Shaw, I want to make sure I understand the full meaning of what you were just sharing. So are you suggesting that we change some of the things that are on the transportation and infrastructure list, or you're saying we should focus on the infrastructure part, which may not be Southwest Corridor or rail? Is that what I'm hearing? Right now, at the infrastructure, it's really the electrification aspect, which goes to Councilor Nog's point of reducing CO2, and that has been the primary focus of both the US DOE and the US DOT. So, yeah, there's I would just hate for us to lose that when I know many other cities in the state are focusing on that effort. All right, Nicole, you got that feedback? Okay. Councilor Goodhouse.
Yes, thank you. A few comments. So one, I agree with Council President Lube that there needs to be part in there for still focusing on money through these times for individuals, households, but also for businesses, landlords, and so forth, because there might be assistance going to individuals, but there's still a lot of landlords or businesses that are still be affected by this. And if there's another couple of variants, and if we look at doing more shutdowns or people being affected by this, that could be more effects back on commercial property owners, business owners, and so forth. A second part with funding, and I think Nicole, you might have been involved with it some. I was working with Lori Faya with the National League of Cities with the transportation infrastructure, was really making sure that I know a lot of times we have projects that come to us. We know all too well where the funding changes, or it has to go through ODOT then to us. And I've been trying to work on showing examples and making it so the money can come directly to us, or we don't run into those problems where ODOT gets the money, they oversee the project, and then by the time it comes to build a project or do it, we have to do less of it or come up with a lot more money. And so if we can start at least now and going forward, really make it a priority to change the way federal funds come to the city, whether or not we have to be, I know that some cities can be designated to be direct benefits, but that's not always easy. You have to have more hoops. But if we can get rid of a lot of the red tape and figure out a way to get it to come directly to us, I know there's been processes we're working on. So it might be too last minute to get all that language and all that in there. If we can get some of that in there to start with, that'd be great. But going forward, that's where I think it's going to be the most beneficial, rather than trying to figure out how to get more funds. If we can figure out how we can cut the middlemen out and we can get it directly to us, where we can actually oversee the projects, that'll save us a lot of money. We can get a lot more done with that.
So that
And
seems
the
like it
final
fits
part-
under this, that seems like it fits under the city funding category potentially, which would be to be seeking, I guess, federal rules that allow direct funding to cities or other municipalities and not needing to go through the state Department of
Correct.
Transportation. Is that what you're saying, Councilor Goodhouse?
Yes, because a lot of the conversations I've had is sometimes that we, on these ODOT projects, that someone that may not even know that area of law or that project, they go to look at it, get approval, comes back to us, we make some changes, goes back, there's a different person, and they're not really designed for it. And we have the staff and the ability to take those direct funds and do it. And I think it would, we know all too well where we've had to either cut projects back or come up with extra money on way too many projects. And it's an issue that, talking with the National League of Cities, the transportation infrastructure, that it's cities throughout the country run into these problems, where you get that mid-size kind of like Tigard, where we're not so big that we can manage it ourselves, but we're not, so small where it goes directly to us. So it'd be a huge benefit, and I think there's becoming more, people are more aware of this issue.
Did you have a second one, Councilor Goodhouse?
And then I had a third one. I don't know if we were going to get in the conversation that Youth Councilor Nog mentioned, but if we were looking at either restricting or not building future highways, I know that we have some expansions going on with 217. Also, there's the I-5 around the Rose Quarter. That's a big JPAC project and so forth. So I don't know if that's something we're going to get in more conversation with or not on that, but that might go against some of the projects we're already working on or talking about.
I think those probably are more, at least looking at the priority list, probably more of a state funding discussion and prioritization. But Nicole, do you think we need to talk about that more on the federal side? No.
No, I
Okay.
think, yeah, for the state makes sense.
Councilor Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the comments that were made about the unknown impacts, continuing unknown impacts of COVID. So maybe under city funding, we might want to make a note there. And I also appreciate the comments that Councilor Shaw made about infrastructure. Having worked with CFM in the past, I know they always encourage us to be prepared for what might be coming down the pike. So I'm assuming our staff or our team will have some projects at the ready that will hope to take advantage of some of those infrastructure programs. So I'm hoping that, there's a little asterisk there, but I appreciate those comments. And that's all I had on the federal priority list. Thanks.
Nicole, I want to just ask about the Southwest Corridor in particular. I view that as a transportation electrification project to a large extent as well. But Councilor Shaw spends a lot more of her full-time work in that space. So I guess I'm deferring to her expertise a bit, but are we getting the sense from TriMet that the Southwest Corridor is not the kind of project that the feds are looking to fund have we gotten more information that indicates that?
I would need to check with our community development and transportation team, and I can follow up and see what we're hearing. But I do know that we saw the Southwest Corridor on the Chamber's agenda, and I think it's something that we just want to keep. But I agree that the infrastructure should be a focus. But I'll follow up with our team and get a more direct answer.
Okay, because I also think the more focused we can be around the things that, as Councilor Shaw put, kind of have the political winds with them, the better off I think we are. And we'd probably have some explaining to do, I will say, with some partners if the Southwest Corridor was not on our federal list. But, we also have to be opportunistic and realistic. So do you feel like, Nicole, that you've gotten feedback that you can work with on the federal list? Do you need, this is kind of awkward with all the feedback we gave, sort of approving. Are you wanting us to approve all of what you presented plus all of our feedback? Is that what you're wanting?
Yes, that would be great. And I am taking notes. So what I heard is that we'll add an item related to support for business and individuals, and just as it relates to COVID recovery and that kind of thing. And then we can look into discussing more about highway extensions and things like that. So yes, adopt with all of the feedback, and then we'll move forward with it.
Okay, let's take a motion on this one then, and then we'll move to the state. Oh, Councilor Goodhouse, question or comment?
Well, Nicole, with the part that I mentioned, is that just too much to lump in or even mention right now? Is there any way to work any of that in there?
For the federal rural
How
run direct funding?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can. And I think that's something we actually have listed in our state agenda. I'd have to look at it directly, but I think there's some language in there. So I think we can include that as well. We can make that happen. Okay,
thank you.
All right, does someone want to make that motion then on the federal agenda? Council President Loop.
I move to approve the federal agenda as discussed with the updates for 2022. Hey, that's the first time I've said the year out loud.
Good job. Do we have a second?
I'm happy to second the motion.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. City recorder, we are doing a roll call vote. Okay.
Okay, and I have a question. Is there an advisory vote from youth counselor for this?
I believe so.
All right. Youth Counselor Nog.
Yes.
Counselor Goodhouse.
Yes.
Counselor Newton.
Yes.
Council President Lube.
Yes.
Counselor Shaw.
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes. All right. I think we've got our federal agenda adopted. Let's move on to the state. And Nicole, thank you for getting that slide already up. Let's start reverse order. So Councilor Newton, what do you want to share here?
Just two things really quickly. First of all, mental health services for additional opportunities. I think it's really important, two things there. It is pretty important connected to our houselessness services. So I don't really see that as a separate thing. I don't know how we integrate that. The other thing too is I think it's really an issue for our youth right now. So I don't know how we address that, but that's a concern that's been expressed for quite a while at the Youth Advisory Council. So I'm not sure that I feel like mental health services should get a little bit more focus. So maybe it's a little more elaborated there, or maybe connected with some of those other items. The other thing I will comment on, I was glad to see the comment about land use reform. I read the description, and I think that's going to be really important to giving communities options and some latitude to be able to provide affordable housing. So I'm glad to see that as well. It's a little wonky, but I think it will be important to give some community flexibility. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Councilor Goodhouse.
One area that stood out, and I just didn't know if we needed to do any clarification, and I know it became quite a conversation at JPAC last month, was on the tolling and road pricing. I don't know if we want to, there was a conversation whether or not some of it should be done or if it should wait and all be done at once. And I know that's the big issue. If portion of it's done, then it could really drive traffic in other parts of the region or really take away from certain areas. And there was quite a decent push to make sure it's done all at once. So I don't know if that's anything we want to include in there or just leave it the way it is, as far as we want to drive a direction as far as do pieces at a time or do it all at once so it doesn't put a burden on a certain part of the region.
Nicole, do you want to comment on what is intended with the bullet that's on there?
Again, I'd have to follow up with our transportation team, but I can ask them if yeah, we want to include language about it being done all at once, if that's the preference that the cities have. So I can follow up.
Councillor Newton.
Yeah, really quick. I took a look at the description on that one and it said to ensure a coordinated approach. So I was assuming that we would be, as a region, taking a look at that and endeavoring as we could to ensure it was a coordinated approach to tolling across the regional system. So that's not a guarantee necessarily, but I didn't comment on that because I was in hopes that that would be the approach we would take.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Goodhouse, anything further?
No.
Councillor Shaw.
Great, thank you, Mayor, and thank you again, Nicole. Really appreciate the priority list and the categories you've put them in, as well as including the ODOT and regional mobility policy, because I think that does recognize the dollars that will be coming from the federal level from the infrastructure bill. So appreciate that. I really hope we can get the urban arterials haul across the finish line. Let's see if we can get that done, perhaps even bump it up with the infrastructure. And then also to I agree with Councilor Newton's comments about providing mental health services. I think that's a key component that maybe we could include within the element of housing and support services. And those are this time. Thank you.
All right, Youth Councillor Nog, you may have other things you want to say, but let's at least start with your thinking on what the impacts might be of your comments about road infrastructure and whether certain things should be adjusted on here. I guess it would mostly be in the transportation and infrastructure category. You know, the advocacy on 99W is really to just study it, and it's really not necessarily about not about adding road capacity, at least in our mind. At least as I've sort of conceived and understood it, it's much more around some of it may have the impact of just not adding road capacity, but moving things faster by having adequate pedestrian and alternative facilities on 99W. But what are your thoughts on all of this?
One of my biggest concerns with road expansion, which I don't think is the real intent of the 99W study, but I was just putting it out there in general that if any of our transportation or infrastructure bills or priorities were to include expansion of roads, I would be a bit wary of that, because I know that us as a city, one of our biggest priorities is also climate change and being climate resilient. And or like 40% of Oregon's carbon emissions currently come from transportation. And there hasn't been that much of a direct correlation with expanding roads and like lower traffic times. So I would be wary of expanding it, especially since building it would take a lot of resources and CO2 emissions, and it would increase road capacity and more cars would just come in and it would make a lot of the local pollution worse. So that was one of my biggest grievances. But other than that, if it's like pedestrian friendly, I would advocate on that and making the city like friendly for pedestrians and bikes.
All right, thank you. Anything else you want to add on the state priority list?
I don't have any specific bills in particular, but maybe adding something in there about being climate resilient and having something about climate in the current bills.
Nicole, you got that note? Okay. Council President Lube.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Councillor Nog, and just really pushing us in this direction. And when we start to, or when I start to look at this list and frame it in the light of, you know, we are looking to create a resiliency plan to move the city along, to really look at things through a climate perspective for what we're leaving behind. You know, I start to look at this list and think about, you know, yes, I do want to put some sort of climate resiliency thing on there, but I think it's looking at all of these individual things with that list, with that in mind. And then I start to think about what are things that we can do to encourage that mindset and those behaviors as a city. And, I think Councilor Shaw could speak to this better than I can. She's an expert, but what are ways that we can create more charging stations around Tigard? How can we encourage the state to put more of those areas in, or to assist us with funding to get more of those in? How can we look at this differently? Because the solutions that we've been looking through, the lens that we've been looking through, has helped get us here. So how do we look at these differently to figure out how to move the city forward and how to push the state on incentivizing that? And I don't have an answer. I'm just sort of spitballing here on if it, encourages conversation or if anybody else has an answer. But I think definitely putting that as some sort of priority would be great, or at least have the mindset when we're, going out for these bills or talking with our legislatures.
All right, Nicole, do you want to summarize what you've heard and then see if there's anything that needs to be added? And then maybe we can do the same thing with the state agenda that we did with the federal.
Yeah, so I heard adding language just around youth and mental health services, so we can add that to the item. It sounds like we might want mental health services under the housing and support services, just more prevalent, so we can do that. And adding an item around climate resiliency. And then I can also follow up with our teams talking about looking through the lens of climate resiliency with a lot of these other items, to Councilor Loob's point. So those are the two items I have in terms of adding. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I think Youth Councilor Nog's point about kind of road expansion is probably, I guess I would ask you to have the community development staff look at whether there's anything in the transportation and infrastructure area that should be, at least reevaluated with that frame of reference. I don't specifically think so reading them, but I'm also not an expert in that area. All right, so is there a motion or anything else that needs to be added or discussed? Anyone? Council President Loob.
I move to adopt our state agenda with the additions discussed for 2022.
And I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, roll call vote.
Youth Councilor Nog,
Yes.
Councilor Goodhouse,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Loob,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes. All right, we have a state legislative agenda that was adopted unanimously. Thank you all. And let's move on to item number 5, which is a quasi-judicial public hearing to consider comprehensive plan amendments for sensitive lands, the Universal Plaza and the Path. And the first thing I'm going to do is open the public hearing. Now would be the time for members of the public that wish to testify on this item to call in. And that number to call in is 503-966-4101. City Attorney Rahala, you've got the hearing procedures for us.
I do. Good evening, Council. This is a quasi-judicial land use proceeding. Council's decision must be based on the following substantive criteria: Tigard Community Development Code chapters 18-120, 18-140, 18-420, 18-510, 18-710, 18-790, 18-910, and 18-920. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the relevant approval criteria described in the staff report or other criteria in the plan or land use regulations that apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue clearly enough so that council understands and can address the issue precludes an appeal to LUBA on that issue. Failure of the applicant to object to a condition of approval may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Members of the City Council will be asked whether they have any conflicts of interest. If a council member has an actual conflict, the council member cannot participate. Council members must declare any contacts about this case with a member of the public. Council members must also declare if they have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. A council member who describes ex parte contacts or independent information shall state whether the contact has impaired their impartiality or ability of the member to vote on this matter. After the discussion of conflicts and ex parte contacts, any person may challenge the participation of a council member or rebut any statements made. The council member in question may respond to such a challenge.
All right, thank you, City Attorney Rahala. I'm going to guess that almost every member of the council has been down the Fanner Creek Trail and in Universal Plaza, so I don't know that, I don't know how much, do we each need to individually disclose that, City Attorney Rahala? Or can we take that as an assumption?
No, I think that is a fair assumption for council to make.
Okay, but does anyone have any ex parte contact to disclose?
Does it matter if my business is owned right next to the plaza? Does that have to be disclosed as well?
Yes, I think that's good to put on the record.
Okay, so I disclose that I own a business diagonally across from the plaza.
All right, any other disclosures or ex parte contacts? Okay, Mr. Nolop, do we have any callers, anyone that wishes to challenge a member of the council's impartiality?
Mr. Mayor, at this time, no callers in the queue.
All right, Mr. McGuire, staff report.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Councilors. I'm Tom McGuire. I'm the Assistant Community Development Director, and I'm sitting in to do the staff report tonight because this was Monica Bilodeau's land use case, and she is no longer with the City of Tigard. So I'm filling in as we work to get that position filled. I'm going to share my screen. A short PowerPoint. So this is the Universal Plaza and path. There we go. So just so you know, I did a test earlier and there is a little bit of delay on my end, so I will try to match my commentary and things with that delay for you. So this is a comp plan amendment and for a significant wetland issue, and this is very similar to two other cases that you have reviewed in the past year. One being the Highway 217 widening, if you remember that one. The other being the extensions and repaving of the Fanner Creek Trail. So in this case, we have design elements of the path that's proposed to connect the Universal Plaza to the existing Fanner Creek Trail that needs to pass through a portion of Tigard's significant wetland, and that would impact 0.004 acres of actual wetland and 0.13 acres of the 50-foot wetland buffer. So our comp plan amendment would be to remove a total of 0.134 acres of wetland and buffer from the map. Here is a aerial of the site, and I'm gonna, if everyone can see this, I'm gonna point out the aerial is a little old. It's got the old building, which has been removed, but this is the Universal Plaza site here with the colored lines. The whole property outlined by white. This is Fanner Creek here with the re-meander that was recently done by Clean Water Services. Fanner Creek Trail is here on the other side mostly, except for this bottom corner. And you'll see the prominent Fanner Creek Trail bridge. So I'm going to move on to the next one. Now the writing on these diagrams is not important. What's important are the shapes and the colors. So again, to orient us, here is the Universal Plaza area here. Fano Creek is here. Fano Creek Trail down here. So this greenish colored area is the actual delineated wetland. The red dotted line is the 50-foot buffer. And then this is the proposed trail connection in this yellow and orangey colors. And the crux of the issue is that as we develop Universal Plaza, as it becomes successful and things really begin to happen there, you'll see that it will be very prominently viewed from the Fano Creek Trail. We also want people to enjoy both the plaza and the trail and get back and forth safely and easily between the two. And with this large wetland, with the buffer and some other, this is also floodplain in here, we want to get them there safely, and we want to have them the least impact on the resources. So I pushed our team really hard when this was being designed about reducing environmental impacts with this. And we came to the conclusion that this was going to be such a prominent connection that there just will be people coming from the trail walking across this area to see what's going on at the plaza. And so in those situations, this is similar to what we did at Dirksen Nature Park. If for those of you who were around back for that project, it's better for the resource to control that public access and make sure it stays where you want it to stay and mitigate for that and control it and reduce the impact to the resource than have that just wide open demand trails, we call it. And also I'll point out, harder to see on here, but if you don't make this connection, the surface connection for someone, an ADA connection, would have to go all the way around the block, this full block around the printing business. So many reasons why this is a good location for this connection. And I'll point out that very small amount of actual wetland impact is right here at this corner. We did contact the printing business and asked them if they would grant us an easement across a portion of their property here so that we could pull that trail back mostly out of the wetland, and they did not agree to that. So we had to stay on public property, so that's why we're just clipping that corner right there and trying to reduce as much of that wetland impact as possible. You'll see in this area, the trail pulls back out of the buffer here, and then it connects here. It connects down here and not up here for two reasons. There's a big slope right here, and we would have to either build a bridge or come back up somehow to get up to this trail. And again, this is also in the floodplain. Anything we do in that area that adds fill or anything that displaces water has to be compensated for somewhere else. So that's why we kept the trail at the ground level so that we don't increase flood. This orange portion is a raised boardwalk. So as we go through the buffer and the wetland itself, it's all on a raised boardwalk, which has, again, less impact on the resource because the water will continue to flow unimpeded. There can be even some vegetation that can grow under that. So many of the functions are maintained under that. One other thing I wanted to point out to you, and that this area right here will be a new stormwater facility serving the plaza. This area is currently paved. That was paved as part of the previous development. So much of that area will be we'll be removing the paving and restoring this buffer. So that further reduces the actual impact to existing resources that are out there. If you remember from the Highway 217 widening, the way the code is written, we count that 50-foot buffer no matter whether it's actual resource there or if it's paved or so. Just so you know, that portion is paved, but will post-project will have vegetation. So covered some of these items. It's a critical pedestrian network infrastructure serving active and recreational needs, and it controls access along Fan Creek. This does involve a Goal 5 ESE analysis. I'm not going to go into that in a lot of depth, but we'll say that we reviewed that and it was done properly and meets our criteria. Analysis concluding that limiting the conflicting use, which is what we call allowing the trail with minimizing its size and location and materials, and then mitigation is a result in the most beneficial consequences for the city and the resource. This went to Planning Commission in December, and the Planning Commission recommends that City Council approve the proposed comp plan amendment, sensitive lands review, subject to the findings and recommended conditions of approval in the staff report. That concludes my presentation. Gary Pagenstacker is with us as well tonight to primarily answer questions. Because this is a city project, we like to set that up with a staff person who represents the project or the applicant, and then I fill the city's role as the reviewer. So with that, I can open it up to questions.
So Mr. McGuire, I want to confirm, I think, an important point here, which is that given that the printing business was not willing to grant an easement, everything's been done to, what I'm gathering from what you've reported, everything's been done that can possibly be done to minimize the impacts of having this connection. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, yes.
Okay. So I also want to keep us on track here. So just as a reminder, council, we are in the asking staff questions, and we're asking questions of Mr. McGuire as the staff member. If we want to ask questions of the applicant, that would be in a moment from Planner Pagenstacker. I know this is awkward when we're the applicant and the staff, but just like everybody else, the city has to follow its own rules. So lots of people may not realize that. If you're watching at home, you're watching the city have to apply for approval to do stuff itself. And so we have to go through both sides of that process. So do we have questions of Mr. McGuire? Anybody? No. Okay, Mr. Pagenstacker, as the applicant.
Good evening, Mayor Snyder and councilors. Good to see you all. I don't have a presentation in addition to what Tom has already said, but I'm here to answer any questions that you might have that go into some detail. Having been the applicant's rep, I was involved in the team in preparing the materials for the application. So if you don't have any questions, then I don't think I have anything to add.
All right, council, questions for the applicant? Councilor Shaw.
Great, thank you, Mayor. It had been mentioned about ADA, and I appreciate, I'm assuming this is a city wanting to make it most beneficial for those who have disabilities to have a shorter path as opposed to a longer path. Was that part of the criteria? And hopefully that's the right city question, not, or the applicant question, not the city question.
Well, I think ADA was a factor in the design of the trail for sure, and that it needed to be a certain width and a certain slope. The issue about the distance traveled without the path was a consideration of the ease of use and comfort for folks that are that need an ADA facility. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, and it sounds like the other part to that was the conclusion that Mr. McGuire was referring to, which is that humans were going to use it whether or not the connection is made properly. I guess you might call that a human game trail or some sort. Might have ensued. All right, other questions or comments? I guess I shouldn't be asking for comments yet. We're not to that part. Any questions? All right. Let's move on to public testimony. I don't believe we received any written public comments. City Recorder Krager, can you confirm that?
That's correct. We received no comment.
All right, Mr. Nolip, are there any callers in the queue that wish to testify?
No callers, Mr. Mayor.
All right, no response to testimony from staff. I will close the public hearing. And council consideration of ordinance number 22-01. Councilor Newton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a quick comment. Mr. McGuire, I really did appreciate the staff report and the report, the ESEE report. I think a good job was done trying to limit the impacts. I do think we would have had an eroded hill if we didn't have a path, because we would have had people just scrambling, you know, up back and forth. So I appreciated the clarity. I did read not all of the report, but a lot of it. And I thought, I just wanted to say kudos. I thought it was well done. Thank you.
All right. Other comments or questions or a motion? Councillor Shaw.
I was going to go ahead and make a motion unless there's some additional comments.
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. I move to approve ordinance number 22-01.
Council President Lube.
I'll second the motion.
Councillor Newton, were you wanting to second or?
I was going to second, but that's fine. No problem.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? City Recorder, read the number and title of the ordinance, please.
Ordinance number 22-01, an ordinance approving comprehensive plan amendment CPA 2021-00004 to remove 0.134 acres of locally significant wetlands from the Tigered Wetland and Stream Corridor Map inventory.
And City Recorder, a roll call vote, please.
Councillor Goodhouse.
Yes.
Councillor Newton.
Yes.
Council President Lube.
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes. All right, ordinance number 22-01 is passed unanimously. Staff, thank you for really robust work on this. Appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is to discuss council board and committee liaison assignments. City Manager Reimer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, good evening again, Mayor and councilors. This is a continuation of a conversation that the council started on April 6th of last year. As you may recall, our past practice has been during our goal setting time that we review your liaison assignments. We did not do that last year. Brought this forward then on April 6th of last year for all of you to discuss the assignments. Specifically, Councilor Shaw had a continuation of former Councilor Anderson's assignments and wanted to discuss those. During the conversation, the council discussed multiple different things, but ultimately at the end decided to continue assignments for 2021 and then come back in early 2022 to continue the conversation. If you would continue these till the next time you would make appointments, which would be in early 2023, or make any adjustments tonight. So happy to answer any questions, but primarily it was to bring forward the conversation again for all of you.
Thank you, City Manager Reimer. And I'm hoping that everybody did some homework and reviewed these beforehand. I do also want to acknowledge, and maybe we'll start with Councilor Shaw and your kind of thoughts, and if you've got some suggested changes or things, maybe that's a good place to start.
Thank you, Mayor. And I was actually going to punt to those of you who have more experience than I do.
Okay.
You've gone through this before. I certainly have some additional thoughts, but I'd love to get your all expertise having been on the council much longer.
Okay. Councillor Goodhouse, you want to start?
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about keeping it simple. I mean, we have a lot of, unusual times right now and being more remote and so forth. So I was gonna say my suggestion would be to keep them the same. And as far as going forward in the future, keep committee assignments at 2-year periods.
All right. Council President Lube?
Yeah, I think, council assignments should be with the election cycle. So every 2 years, and that's sort of the committees that you're on. And when a new council is seated or a new mayor, that's changed. That being said, I don't see a reason for us to go through a process of changing the assignments currently. Just go ahead and stick with them for the rest of the year, and then revisit and go through new assignments when the new council is seated in January of 2023.
All right. Thank you, Council President Lube. Councillor Newton?
I would tend to support what Council President Lube had to say. However, if Councillor Shaw had something in specific in mind, I'd be open to seeing what her interests were. What I did was I took a look at the committees I'm assigned to, and Public Safety Advisory Board, obviously, we're going to be finished in June, so I don't know that makes sense to change. I love the Committee for Community Engagement, but if somebody wanted that isn't as, that can change month to month. We're sort of at a critical point on the Water Partnership Oversight Committee, so I don't see making a change there. The Metropolitan Area Communications Commission meets about twice a year, so that's an easy one. They do meet during the day, and sometimes issues come up, so you have to meet more often. But that's one. If somebody wanted to take that on, that's kind of doesn't matter. But we are about to get into the heavy review period for the CDBG program. So if somebody wants to take that on, it needs to happen like by next Thursday, because we start our review process then. So what I did was took a look at the committees I'm on and whether or not right now it made sense to make changes. There's a couple that if somebody wanted, that would be fine. Wouldn't make a big difference, but there are a few that I don't think a change at this time would be prudent. So I think it's easier to do the 2-year cycle. But again, if Councillor Shaw had something specific in mind, I'm absolutely open to hearing what she has in mind.
Youth Councillor Nog, would you like to provide any input on this topic? I don't want to, force you on the spot, but if you've got some things you want to say, please do.
I think this was the topic I was supposed to email Council President Lube about election cycles.
Oh, this is actually probably not, but we can connect offline off of that. I think that's some of the comments tonight are kind of connected to keeping this tied to the election cycles, but I think the feedback that she may be looking for is about a similar-ish topic, but different, related more to term limits and definitions of terms and things like that.
Councillor Nog, this is the situation where, we have you now as the formal liaison to the Tigard Youth Advisory Council, and I'm the alternate, so they won't be seeing me as regularly because you're the regular attendee, and so that's your liaison assignment. So if you had comments about other interests you had, we'd be looking for that now. So.
Oh, like kind of an update for TIAC?
Well, or we're talking about all the assignments around these. So if you think that, for example, if you like the way that assignment is working with having you be the lead, then that would be great feedback. Or if there are other assignments that you think maybe would be good for you to be the leader or representative of the council on, that would be good. We are looking at a list of all the, I mean, I know you may not be referencing the document right now, but there is an attachment in the council agenda called appointment matrix, and it has sort of each individual's members of the council's formal assignments to different committees and commissions and regional groups. And so your primary one, as they were just mentioning, is the Youth Advisory Council. So that's what we're seeking input on. And certainly I think having you be the Youth Advisory Council liaison has been an awesome suggestion and is working well.
Yeah, I can only view the meeting guide and the written public comment for tonight, but I am totally okay with my role as being liaison, and it's been working out well for me. I've been talking to Natalia. We've actually been coming up with some ideas together on implementing some things and planning projects. And I would love to continue doing that. If there's anything else that you think I would be good at doing, I'd love to do it as well.
Okay. We will keep that in mind. And I think that having you in that lead role with TYAC is a great role, and we can look at other possible things that might make sense. I know you've also been, engaged a lot on the climate resiliency front, so that's excellent too. Councillor Shaw, you've now heard a lot of people speak. What would you like to share now?
Yeah, I've certainly not heard your opinion, Mayor, but I'm happy to jump in and appreciate Council's comments, both Councillor Newton and also Council President Liu and Council Goodhouse. Perhaps what I could do is, and not wanting to, it sounds like everybody like it to continue at 2-year terms and have this discussion in 2023. So perhaps I'll plant a seed for interests, both of transportation, but also looking towards wisdom from Councilor Newton, and perhaps I could just sit down a couple of the meetings with regards to the Committee for Community Engagement, because I see that having a natural alliance with the houselessness issue that we're working on as a city. So with that, I'll go with the council's majority on this one.
So transportation, just so I'm really clear, do you have specific assignments that you're thinking about related to transportation for the next year, or perhaps we could consider making a change tonight? Is there a particular either board or commission that you're thinking about?
Well, given Councilor Lubin noted that I do work within transportation and have some expertise within the mobility space and electrification space. So looking at either TTEC or strategy team, but again, I'm happy to wait till 2023 and work just with you all as a councilor on some of these issues. And then also with, I'd like to get some tutelage from Council Member Newton on just and her guidance with regards to the community and all the great work she's done there as well.
Councillor Shaw, if we were to entertain, I love the CCE, but I don't want to be greedy. If we were to entertain making that change, I don't want to overload you. Is there a committee that you would look to swapping? So I would take something off your plate. Or do you want to think about that? I mean, I think that's what we would need to look at. So I could free it up. So anyway, I didn't know if you had something in mind.
Councillor Newton, before she responds to that, I'll throw this in too, and that is that I think I'm the primary on the transportation on TTAC, and I don't, Councillor Shaw, I have a lot of responsibilities, and I would not have an issue. I mean, I am doing a lot of our other transportation stuff, but I would not, I would be okay if you'd like to take that role this year. I don't object to that. I think that might be a good fit. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Mr. Mayor, isn't Councilor Goodhouse the primary on TTAC?
I think he's
I've been
the
attending
alternate.
that. I've been attending that as a primary the whole time, attending all the meetings, and I did all the interviews for the last 2 times. But I've been, for the last 2 years, I've been fully attending every meeting and doing interviews and everything on that one.
So is the matrix incorrect?
It might be because I've been time attending every meeting and did the interviews and everything the last 2 years, I think, or however long it's been.
No, Mr. Mayor, it does say that Councilor Goodhouse is the alternate. It doesn't list a primary for TTAC. Oh, no, it's on your sheet. Never mind. I'm sorry. I was going
to say, am I losing my mind? It's
no, I am. I'm sorry. I wasn't going to pull the Omicron card, but I'm going to. I'm starting to fade, people. So sorry.
Okay. Well, what Councilor Goodhouse just said is true, though, and so maybe what would make more sense. And Councilor Shaw, what do you think about this? What do you? And let's get Councilor Goodhouse's input too, but. Maybe we should just move that to the 2 of you and just, at least that will reflect what's actually happening in real life. And either Councilor Goodhouse could become primary and you could become the alternate and then, attend as you want. That might make sense. I don't know what your thoughts are, or if you'd really like to be the primary this year, we could ask Councilor Goodhouse what his thoughts are on that.
Yeah, Mayor, I'd be happy to be the alternate representative if indeed Councilmember Goodhouse is attending those. So that would be fine for me if we wanted to make that change in this cycle.
Okay. So I think since it's my own assignment, I can give up the primary to Councilor Goodhouse and then have Councilor Shaw listed as the alternate would be, I think, what the proposal is. And I think that's a good adjustment. And Steve, are you guys tracking this staff-wise, I hope?
Yes, we are, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So that would be the one change. I know Councilor Newton, you had proposed something about the Committee for Citizen Engagement. Did you, Councilor Shaw, did you want to pursue something around that as well, or are you okay with this change for this year and then we'll reevaluate next year?
Mayor, I'm okay with this change, and then perhaps what I could do is just sit in on a couple of those meetings just to better understand the Committee for Community Engagement, and also, again, I know Councilor Newton has been doing this for quite some time. I'd love to just be her shadow and learn.
Council President Lube, I'm noticing you're the alternate on that group. Should we also consider, I don't know how strongly you feel about it, but what would you think about having Councilor Shaw be the alternate on the CCE?
That would be fine.
Okay. Councilor Shaw, do you like that too?
Yeah, and if that case, would it be, just so I don't completely drop the ball on too many things, since I've added now a couple of committees, is it possible would Councilor Newton be interested in the Budget Subcommittee, Social Services?
Sure, I can take that on. That's fine. When do they meet? I got to be careful of that, right?
It says 2 meetings in March.
Okay, I can handle that. No problem. Sign me up.
Okay. Do we need the council? Steve, are you wanting the council to actually vote on this? I guess maybe you'll bring it back as once it's written down with the changes, or did you want to vote tonight?
I would suggest a vote. I have the 3 changes that were just discussed. Councilor Shaw serving as the alternate to the TTAC as well as CCE, and then Councilor Newton now fulfilling the Budget Subcommittee role. But I think if you made a motion that just made those changes, we'll update the matrix and get that on the website and get it out to all of you until we discuss this again next year.
All right. Someone want to make a motion? Council President Lube?
I move to appoint Councilor Goodhouse, the primary on TTAC, Councilor Shaw, the secondary, the alternate on TTAC, Councilor Shaw, the secondary on the Committee for Committee for Community Engagement, and to move Councillor Newton to the Budget Subcommittee for Social Events.
I think it's social services. I think that one was. Yes.
It was so close.
I know, and I just, if it weren't a motion, I wouldn't have said anything, but I want to make sure we got it right. Okay. So we've got a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please, City Recorder.
All right, and do we go with an advisory vote from the youth counselor?
Sure.
All right, Youth Counselor Nog.
Yes.
Counselor Goodhouse.
Yes.
Counselor Newton.
Yes.
Council President Lube.
Yes.
Counselor Shaw.
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes. All right. We have new assignments. Thank you. And Councillor Shaw, thanks for stepping up. And I think you'll get to learn more great stuff.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Let's see. We have no non-agenda items. City Manager Reimer, staff administrative report, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to start by saying thanks to a few different teammates. First to our public works, our facilities, and our police teammates for their efforts over the course of the last week during the wintry conditions that we had. We received several positive comments from our community about the time and the effort and the care they took to make sure our roads were passable, to make sure people were safe, to make sure our facilities were safe. So kudos goes out to many teammates in those three areas. Same to our library team. Our library team was diligently working every day to make sure we had a fully teamed building and so we could serve our community. And so thanks to them to keeping the doors open at our library. I believe we kept our doors open as much as anyone, if not more than most other libraries, just as a way to continue to serve our community in a safe way. I also want to thank our community service officer, or known as CSO, Brandon Peterson, for his continued efforts working with our unhoused community. As many of you know, he has really developed some great relationships with the individuals, with our partners in the community, and just continues to do his good work. Excuse me. Happy to report that as of this last week, he was successful in working with our partner agencies once again to get housing referrals for 2 individuals, 1 male, 1 female. And it's not just a simple make a phone call, right? There's a lot of conversations that happen with individuals, creating the trust to have the conversation. So just really want to say thank you to him for his efforts and the leadership of the chief and many others that make this happen in our community. Just a few updates from our library, a lot of things happening there, as I mentioned. First is we have our borrow a laptop program that's now offered. And so individuals can sign out laptops for a 2-week period. They all have Wi-Fi hotspots to help bridge that digital divide, gives people an opportunity to connect for housing, or for housing, it could be housing applications, let's say job applications, but just many other things that sometimes we all take for granted. And so this is just one more way we're trying to help our community. We also just had our New Year's Eve program that was virtual, and we had 24 families registered this year, which is, I think, pretty amazing. And so there's a lot of fatigue for virtual and remote events, but we still had 24 families that took the time to kind of come together virtually and just celebrate New Year's Eve at noon that day, and in I guess, a safe environment in their homes, but celebrating with others. And then last, we've talked about having the library cards for all of the students within the school district. And an elementary school student visited the Tigard Library recently to get her first card, and this was on New Year's Eve. And she said that she earned the library card by reading 100 chapter books. And so she was reading to earn her card, but just another great example of our youth and our families and just the support that everyone has. So that concludes my remarks tonight. But thanks again for your direction this evening on all the items that were before you.
Well, thank you. And that's a great story to end on. I want to read 100 chapter books. I should read 100 chapter books. Okay. And City Manager Reimer, I guess before we move on to executive session, I do want to express on behalf of the council and the entire city our appreciation for the staff's work, both in public works and in police, and everyone that supported behind them through the last couple of weeks. And I know it was a lot of effort and a lot of work, and right during the holidays, and during a pandemic. So just want to acknowledge that on behalf of the entire council and the city residents as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will make sure that gets communicated to our teammates.
Okay, thank you. And with that, the Town Center Development Agency is going to be convening and going into executive session to discuss real estate negotiations under ORS 192.660 subsection 2E. At the conclusion of the TCDA executive session, the Tigard City Council will reconvene and enter into a second executive session to discuss the performance evaluation of a public officer or employee under ORS 192.660 subsection 2I. No executive session may be held for the purpose of taking any final action or making any final decision. Executive sessions are closed to the public. The council will adjourn after the executive sessions. I'm going to suggest that we take a 5-minute bio break in between. So we will reconvene in our first executive session at 7:55 is what I have on my clock. And good night, Tigard.
Good night, Tigard.